My 29-year-old wife, who still looks stunning, told me something that would rock the foundations of our marriage. It wasn't in some vague or cryptic way. She laid it all out plain as day, in a way that even I couldn't misinterpret to set the stage I had planned. I had arranged for an elegant evening at one of our favorite upscale spots. Everything was meticulously arranged. The crisp, white tablecloths, a wine selection to impress, and even a diamond necklace she'd been eyeing for a while. I had spent nearly $1. I didn't realize how soon I'd be thinking of Was to get that money back. I spent the entire evening thinking about it. I couldn't shake the sense that something was off. Our usual easygoing banter was overshadowed by an invisible tension. She seemed distracted. Her eyes were wandering around the room, as if she was searching for something or someone. Normally, we couldn't look away from each other, but tonight, her gaze danced around. She barely landed on me. It wasn't until after we had finished our main course, and I poured us another round of wine that she finally spoke up. Her voice was heavy with something. "Rob," she started to tremble slightly in her voice. "There's something I've been keeping inside for a while, and I think it's time to talk about it." I put my glass down and had a sinking feeling. What could she possibly be about to say? Was she finally ready to talk about starting a family? We'd agreed to wait until our careers were more stable, but now that we were in a better place, I was excited about the idea. However, as she avoided my eyes, it was clear this wasn't about money. It was something else, something bigger. She sighed deeply and finally met my gaze. "Rob," she said, more gravely. I'd never heard her speak like that before. "I've been doing a lot of soul-searching lately, and there's something I need to do for me, for us." Her voice trembled as she continued. "I need to explore parts of myself outside of this relationship." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of me. I asked, my voice shaky as I leaned in to hold her gaze, but she looked away, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "I want to see other people, Rob. I need to explore that side of myself. I hope you can understand so we can avoid worse pain down the line." The ground beneath me seemed to shift, and I felt a rush of heat to my face and a pounding in my chest. I looked around at the other people in the room and repeated my voice, saying, "Are you telling me you want to date other men?" I felt disbelief dripping from every word, and I didn't even recognize my own voice, which was louder and more desperate, fighting to hold on to. She bit her lip, hesitated, and then finally nodded. Yes, admitting that it was part of it. The room seemed to spin, and for a moment, everything blurred. The elegant restaurant, the soft chatter of other diners. It all faded into the background as her words echoed in my ears. "You want to date other men. Men, and you expect me to just be okay with it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Rob, lower your voice," she hissed, glancing around, clearly worried that we'd draw attention. Then it hit me. She had picked this busy restaurant for a reason. She knew I wouldn't cause a scene in public. She had blindsided me. I felt trapped. My mind was racing to keep up with the betrayal unfolding before me. "Rebecca," I pushed my voice quieter, but no less strained. "Why other men? What does this even mean? Are you planning on sleeping with them? Are you leaving me?" "I'm not leaving you. I love you. You're my soulmate. I just need this time to figure out who I am and explore parts of myself I've ignored. It's not about abandoning you." Her words were meant to reassure me, but they fell flat. They lingered between us like a fog of uncertainty. How could she ask me to do that? This was a new low. How could she think I'd be okay with her running off with other men, only to come back to me like nothing happened? My stomach churned, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I couldn't breathe. I couldn't sit there any longer. I stood up, neatly placing my napkin on the table, and drained my glass of wine. I downed my wine in one gulp and turned on my heel, heading for the door. "Rob, where are you going?" she called after me, her voice panicked. "I don't know," I replied, not looking back. "You should probably take a cab home." I drove for hours with no destination in mind, my head pounding with the chaos of my thoughts. Streetlights blurred together and the hum of the engine was the only thing keeping me grounded. At some point, I must have fallen asleep in the car. I woke up in an unfamiliar car park the next morning, my head still aching from the reality of the night before. I relieved myself behind a bush, which I thought was a bit classless, and then set out in search of coffee. I found a small diner and ordered breakfast. I got a large cup of coffee and started trying to piece together a plan. I knew I wasn't going to agree to this, but what now? I powered up my phone, which I'd turned off the night before. I found countless missed calls and texts from Rebecca. She was worried and scared about where I was. I'd gone. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to face her, not yet. After several cups of coffee and a plate of eggs and bacon, I decided I couldn't avoid it forever. I had to go home. When I pulled into the driveway, Rebecca was already outside waiting for me. She ran over as soon as she saw me, her face pale. With a worried look on her face, she asked where I had been all night. She rushed towards me and said, "I thought something terrible had happened to you." I stepped back as she tried to kiss me. "Let's clean up first," she said. "Then we'll sit down and have a serious talk about what you said last night." I walked past her, and I went straight for the shower, letting the hot water wash over me as I tried to make sense of everything. Was she testing me? Was she really serious about this? Could our marriage survive this betrayal? By the time I came out dressed in fresh clothes and with another cup of coffee in hand, Rebecca was seated. I went to the kitchen island to find her waiting for me. I grabbed a notepad and pen and sat across from her, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Rebecca, I need you to explain again why you think this exploration is a good idea." She didn't hesitate this time. "Rob, I feel like I'm missing something. I need to feel validated as a woman. I want to figure out what I need, and I think I can only do that by exploring relationships outside of ours." I took a deep breath and forced myself to stay calm. "So, you're saying you don't know what you need, but you think sleeping with other men will help? You figure that out?" Her voice wavered. "I'm not saying I'll definitely sleep with anyone, Rob, but if the right connection happens, I might consider it." My chest tightened. This wasn't the woman I married, and I wasn't sure if she ever would be again. I stared at her, my heart hammering in my chest, trying to understand what she was really saying. "So, you're saying you might sleep with another man if the connection feels right? And you expect me to sit here in our home while you do this?" My voice cracked under the weight of it all, pressing down on me. "Rob, it's not like that." Rebecca said frustration was creeping in. Her voice, "I'm not leaving you. I don't want to leave. I just need space to figure myself out." "You need space to figure yourself out by dating other men," I shot back, feeling my composure slipping. "How is that supposed to work? Rebecca, how can you possibly think I'd be okay with this?" At her hands, twisting her wedding ring around her finger, "I've been feeling this way for a couple of years now, Rob. Our lives have been so consumed by work and routine that I don't feel valued like I used to. I'm not saying it's your fault, but things have changed. Everything I do is for us and our future together. Do you think it's been easy working day in and day out to build this life for us? Do you think this house and this life just happened on their own?" Rebecca flinched at my tone, but I didn't care. My anger was bubbling to the surface, and I wasn't about to hold it in any longer. "We've been putting all our money into this house, Rebecca. We've built a life together, and now you're telling me that I haven't made you feel valued?" I couldn't believe it. She sat there for a moment, her hands still fidgeting, before finally speaking. "I just feel like there's something missing, a connection that we had. It's been gone for a while." I clenched my fists, struggling to keep my voice steady. "So let me get this straight. You're planning to fill that gap by going out and finding it with another man or however many men it takes. And I don't know if I should just stand by and watch while you explore this missing connection." She avoided my gaze again, clearly unsure how to respond. "Rob, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not saying I'll definitely sleep with someone, but I need to at least see if I can find what I'm missing." The words hung in the air. I was taken aback by what I heard. I had always assumed that we would face the same challenges as any other couple, such as financial difficulties or disagreements about children. However, I had never imagined that I would be sitting across from my wife discussing her desire to, what if you sleep with other men? What if you go out there and meet someone and you feel that connection again? Then what? You come home and tell me everything's fine, that our marriage is stronger because you got what you needed from someone else. She looked at me, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. "I don't know, Rob. I don't know how this is supposed to go, but I swear I still love you. I don't want to lose you, but you are losing me," I said quietly, the realization sinking in as I spoke. "Every word you said tonight has driven a wedge between us. This thing you want is not something I can support. It goes against everything I thought we stood for." Rebecca reached across the table, trying to take my hand, but I pulled away. "Rob, please. I just need you to understand that this is something I have to do for me, for us. To do for me, for us, for us." I laughed bitterly. "This isn't for us, Rebecca. This is for you. You're the one asking for this. You're the one who wants to step out of this marriage. I'm not stepping out, she said, her voice soft but firm. I'm asking for space to sleep with other men. I got up quickly and felt like the room was too small and too crowded. I needed to get out of there before I said something I'd regret. Rebecca stayed seated, watching me as I paced the room. Rob, I know this is hard, but we can get through this. I'm not asking for a divorce. I asked for some time to think. I stopped and turned to face her. I was feeling angry and sad. What happens after this? You're asking for time to decide what to do. Do we just pretend like none of this happened? Do I just forget that my wife was out there searching for a connection with other men? She didn't answer. She couldn't answer. I shook my head, feeling a deep sense of betrayal. Rebecca, I don't know how we're supposed to move forward from this. You've changed everything without another word. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her sitting there in silence. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay, not with the weight of her words crushing me from the inside out. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was quieter than before. I can't say for sure what I'll do if it feels right with the right person. I might consider it, I replied, avoiding my gaze. Are you thinking about cheating on me? I asked, barely able to keep the disbelief out of my voice. It's not cheating if it's done with your knowledge, she replied calmly, as if that made everything acceptable. My blood pressure spiked. I took a deep breath and sipped my coffee, wishing it were something stronger. I had to stay calm and think clearly during this conversation. Let me get this straight, Rebecca. I tried to understand your unusual proposal. You plan to meet other men, go out with them, and even have physical relationships, yet you still plan to live here with me. Is that what you're saying? Honey, it's not that simple. I replied, what about us? Are we supposed to just pause our marriage while you go? Are we still physically involved while you're doing this? Absolutely, she said, her tone full of conviction. You and I are a family, Rob. I love you and I want to stay with you. This is just something I need to do for myself. How often do you expect to do this? Every weekend, twice a week, every night, I replied, my frustration mounting. How far do you plan to take this exploration? I haven't decided yet, she admitted, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Why are you so focused on the specifics? Because I need to know what my life is going to be like. While I was out there meeting new people and sleeping with other people, I said, my words dripping with bitterness, that I didn't have a girlfriend, at least not yet. She winced, but I wasn't done. Rebecca, I need some clarity here. I continued, my anger barely contained. Are you really set on this decision? Have you even thought about what this will do to our marriage? She nodded but didn't respond directly, avoiding my eyes. Then she said the one thing that would define the course of our future. If you love me, you'll let me do this. If you love me, You didn't even ask for this, so here's my ultimatum. Rebecca, infidelity is a deal breaker in our marriage, even with forewarning. Here are my terms. If you see other men, you need to move out. I'm not sharing a home with you while you're off dating and sleeping with other people. Move out, she said, her voice wavering. Where am I supposed to go? Maybe you can stay with your friend Matilda, I said, my words bitter. She's divorced, living alone. I'm sure she'd love to help you out, but if that doesn't work, rent a short. You'll be responsible for your own apartment, rent, utilities, and car payments. I'm not covering anything while you're doing this. Rebecca worked as a third-grade teacher, earning a decent salary. I was a forensic auditor for a major firm, making a good living with yearly bonuses. Money wasn't the issue, but from what she was saying, it seemed like I wasn't fulfilling all her other needs. That stung. She looked at me, seemingly thinking I might be softening. Maybe she thought she had the upper hand. I was willing to give in, but I wasn't done. If you're considering an open marriage, I guess I'm supposed to sit here patiently while you're out there with other men. Are you planning to come back to me eventually? Absolutely, she said, her voice dripping with reassurance. I love you. You're my husband. I want to have a family with you. I couldn't help but let out a hollow laugh. What am I supposed to do while you're out there physically involved with other men? Stay faithful to you? Just wait until you're done with your boyfriends, and then what? Act like everything's normal? Have you even thought about what this does to me? I only want you, Rob. You're my husband, and nothing about that will change. My feelings for you won't change, even while I'm exploring. When I come home, I want you to be here, to be my husband and the father of our future children. Her words were almost surreal. She really believed that she could have it both ways, that I would stand by while she pursued these other men. Somehow, we'd still have a future together. Well, I stood up and crossed my arms. You need to start packing your things and move them into the guest room. I don't think I can sleep next to you right now. Your plan is too much for me. It feels like you're leaving, even if you're not saying the words. Rebecca stayed silent, perhaps finally realizing that I wasn't going to just accept this without a fight. Maybe she thought I was a pushover, that I'd let her carry on with this madness while pretending. Everything was fine. Well, she was wrong. I'd seen this coming for a while now. Matilda, her divorced friend, had been a bad influence from the start. I suspected this whole idea was coming from her. Matilda had been a fourth-grade teacher at the same school and had her own scandal a couple of years ago. She'd been cheating on her husband with multiple partners. Now she was single, 35, and living a carefree life, no doubt whispering her warped ideas into Rebecca's ear. But here's the truth. If Rebecca crossed that line, there'd be consequences. If I were to leave, it wouldn't be a family. There'd just be divorce papers. I stood up and Rebecca looked at me, confused. Is that all? Rob, are you asking me to leave? Yeah, for now. Let me be clear, Rebecca. I don't want you to go through with any of this. We made vows to each other to stay faithful, and now you're planning to break that vow. What do you think I'm supposed to do? Just wait around while you see other men? If you want an open marriage, I guess I'll have the same option. She didn't have an answer for me. Without another word, I grabbed my car keys and walked out the door. Rob, where are you going? She called after me. I don't know yet, I replied, not turning around. But move your things into the spare room and start looking for a place to stay. You're not bringing any of your affairs into this house. Rebecca, not Matilda. She'd have to deal with the fallout on Monday, and I was already out of the house before Rebecca even woke up. I wasn't going to let this go on without a fight. I didn't think she could just walk around dating other men while I stood by idly. I made contact, and my friend, who handled all kinds of legal matters from real estate to wills, was there for me. He wasn't a divorce lawyer, but he could refer me to someone who was. He came through, recommending a top. I got in touch with a notch divorce attorney from his firm, and by that same afternoon I had a meeting set up with her. It wasn't a conversation I wanted to have, but it was necessary. I made it clear to the attorney that I wanted to keep things as amiable as possible. I wasn't out for blood. A 50-50th split of our assets was fine by me. After all, we had built this life together until now. I wasn't going to drag it out. I wasn't ready to file anything yet. I needed proof of her infidelity before making the next move. The week crawled by. I spent as little time at home as possible, going to the gym every night to burn off the stress. Meanwhile, Rebecca was practically glued to Matilda. By Thursday, she told me she'd be staying with Matilda for a few weeks until she could. She said she needed to find a place of her own. I knew exactly what that meant. It gave her free rein to see her new boyfriends without me in the way. Saturday came around, and Rebecca was packing her things into the car, getting ready to leave. But just before she drove off, she paused, looking at me with wide eyes. Rob, I don't want to go. Are you sure we can't work something out so I can stay? She asked. I sighed, feeling the weight of it all. Rebecca, if you really loved me and wanted to fix this, you wouldn't be doing this. I want you to stay, but I can't let you be with other men and still call yourself my wife. If you're not willing to try counseling, I don't know what else to say. So go. She loaded the last of her bags, and I drove to the hardware store, bought new locks and spent the rest of the weekend changing them. I changed the garage door code to make sure she couldn't get back in the following week. It was torture. I hit the gym every day, ran until I couldn't think anymore. I was trying to shake the feeling that I had failed as a husband. How had it come to this? Was I really so inadequate that my wife had to turn to other men in my confusion? I started researching infidelity online. I was desperate for answers. I was surprised to find out that nearly 40% of married people cheat. What shocked me even more was that in fact, 90% of them stay married. In many cases, the infidelity was simply tolerated, especially if there were kids involved. Couples just carried on as if nothing had happened. Many of these wives even claimed they still loved their husbands, but felt something was missing at home. Many women who cheat often explain that the demands of family life make closeness with their husbands feel monotonous. They juggle kids' activities, housework, and the daily grind, which can dull the connection with their spouses. They crave something exciting, someone who gives them attention without immediately talking about kids or errands. It made me wonder if the secret to a lasting marriage was acting as if your wife were having an affair but without the actual cheating, focusing purely on the physical connection. I briefly considered the idea of trying to pick my wife up at the club she and Matilda visited, though it felt absurd. People cheat for all sorts of reasons, including a lack of physical satisfaction or missing it. Some people cheat because they're passionate, while others feel disconnected from their spouse. Some even cheat out of revenge for their partner's betrayal. A few claim that affairs help save their marriage, though I'm still not convinced. That's what research on infidelity shows. Marriage is complicated, and maintaining a relationship requires work. Open marriages are when both partners agree to see other people, but they rarely work out. There are emotional attachments, feelings get hurt, and it usually leads to divorce. Polyamorous relationships are also complicated. They're not simple, especially when kids are involved. There's also the constant risk of bringing a sexually transmitted disease into the home. For me, monogamy is the only way a marriage can work if both partners don't agree on that. They need to reconsider the relationship or find someone else. Had I neglected my wife and pushed her away while I focused on building a life for us? Did I miss something? I couldn't be sure, but I did know I wasn't happy about her leaving to pursue other men. She claimed I wasn't giving her what she needed, but I didn't see how her actions were going to fix our marriage. The next week passed slowly, much like the one before it. I didn't reach out to her, and Rebecca only sent me a single message asking me to forward her mail to her new address. There was no sign that she was interested in repairing our relationship. It was all business with no personal touch. It was clear that she was moving forward with her plan of finding herself a boyfriend, or maybe more than one. I thought about following her from her apartment just to see where she and Matilda were going and who she was meeting. I even drove by the place a few times, but I resisted the temptation to stop. I knew I couldn't do that to myself. I had to let her make her decision. If she was going to come back to me, it had to be on her own. Otherwise, she wouldn't really be my wife anymore. Each day that passed, the chances of her return seemed slimmer. The longer it went on, the less willing I was to take. After a month with almost no communication between us, Rebecca showed up at the house. When her key didn't work, she knocked and rang the bell. I answered, keeping my face neutral. "What brings you here?" I asked. "My key doesn't work," she replied. "What's going on?" "That's because I changed the locks. I came to grab a few things I left behind when I moved in with Matilda," she said. There was no time for small talk. She was just trying to get her stuff. I stepped aside and let her in. After all, it was still her home, legally speaking. We went to the garage, where I had gathered her belongings into several boxes. "Why did you pack up my things?" I asked her how long she planned to stay with Matilda. "Matilda has been really supportive," she said. "I'll stay with her a little longer, maybe a few months, but I'll come back. I'll be a better wife then, and we can start a family." I couldn't help but roll my eyes at her comment. How could she possibly believe that being with other men would make her a better wife or prepare her for motherhood? "So, have you found a boyfriend yet?" I asked bluntly. Rebecca blushed. She didn't need to answer. I already knew. Eventually she admitted, "Matilda and I have gone on a few dates with guys from the club, but that's all. How's the physical part going with your new boyfriends?" I asked. She turned red and started rummaging through the boxes, so I left her to it and went back to the kitchen. I grabbed my coffee and sat down with the newspaper. A few minutes later, Rebecca came in carrying a large bag and looking around the kitchen as if she expected to find it in disarray. But it was spotless. I had a cleaning service coming 3 times a week, so it was all clean. There were no dirty dishes, no beer bottles, and no piles. Everything was in perfect order, including the laundry. When I saw her curiosity, I was asked how I was doing since I moved in. I replied, "I'm fine." I told her that work keeps me busy and that I've been traveling a lot. She looked slightly worried and asked if I was moving on. I told her that I've been keeping busy and that I've been joining a cycling club. We meet twice a week for rides. It's fun and I've met some new people. We usually grab a burger and a beer afterwards. I could see the interest flicker in her eyes. She hadn't expected this. Maybe she thought I'd just sit at home waiting for her to come back. But it was starting to dawn on her that things might not go as she planned. Later, I found out that Rebecca had been seeing 2 men from the club she frequented with Matilda. She had been sleeping with both of them. But neither of them wanted to spend more than 1 night with her. They were both married and just looking for a bit of fun. Rebecca was just a temporary distraction for them. Typical pump and dump. By the time 2 months had passed, I had accepted that my marriage was over. Rebecca had been silent for weeks, which made it clear that she had no interest in coming back or fixing anything. Even if she did want to return, there would be conditions, and I wasn't sure if. I even let her in on what I knew. It was pretty clear to me that she'd taken a vacation to the Dominican Republic with one of her boyfriends during her school break. They'd spent a week in the sun, apparently working on their tan, and who knows what else. If this was her idea of making our marriage stronger, she was sorely mistaken. It didn't help that Matilda had influenced Rebecca's view of me, likely painting me as the neglectful husband who drove her to cheat. Now Rebecca was living in it too. Rebecca had gone off on her own tropical getaway with another man. I was called in to discuss the situation with her mother. I told her the truth, that Rebecca had left to pursue relationships with other men. Her mother was stunned. I encouraged her to speak with Rebecca directly. When she did, Rebecca's response was predictable. "Why did you leave? What's going on with you? And Rob, is he treating you badly?" her mother asked. "No, Mom. He's not mistreating me, but he doesn't make me feel the way I need to feel. I don't feel wanted or attractive. I need that. And I'm not getting it from him, so I'm looking elsewhere for now. But don't worry. In a few months, maybe a year, you'll be back with Rob, and everything will be fine." Rebecca's mother didn't beat around the bush. "If you keep doing this, Robert won't be waiting for you when you decide to come back. Cheating is a sure way to end your marriage. Don't you see that?" But Rebecca was confident. She said, "Rob loves me, Mom. He understands." She said she'd come home and they'd start a family. She said it'd be fine. Her mother tried to warn her, but Rebecca wouldn't listen. I realized it was time for me to move on. What was good for the goose was good for the gander. It had been about 3 months since Rebecca left. I knew I couldn't stay stuck in this rut any longer. So I asked a woman I knew from the cycling group to go out for dinner. It wasn't anything serious. I just wanted some company and a change. My daily routine had become predictable since Rebecca left. I worked, went to the gym, and cycled, and I slept day after day. I followed the same pattern, waiting for things to settle down. That was my life. I hoped that Rebecca would come to her senses and return home, putting an end to this absurd situation. But deep down I knew that wasn't likely if she did come back. It wouldn't be as the wife I once knew. She was clearly enjoying her newfound freedom, searching for the excitement and validation she believed had been missing in her marriage. This lined up with everything I'd read about why married women cheat. So I made the decision to arrange a date. I didn't want it to seem desperate or awkward, so I figured the best way was to get to know I thought I'd get to know my cycling group a little better before making a move. I didn't want a pity date. I wanted something real. Most of my cycling friends already knew about my separation, and I suspected that some of them had even heard about Rebecca's active dating life in a city this size. Word gets around. So I asked Ruth, one of the women in the group, if she'd like to grab a drink or tea with me. I was surprised when she agreed without hesitation. We made plans for a casual Saturday night outing, followed by a kayaking trip on a nearby lake. I had kayaked a few times before, so I was comfortable with the idea. Ruth had never tried it, but she was interested, so we went ahead with the plan. It turned into our first date. The kayaking went well. We covered about 10 miles in 3 hours, and afterwards we had dinner at a nice little restaurant. I had a craft beer with steak and fries, and she ordered white wine and pasta. The atmosphere was relaxed, and there was no pressure at all. We ended the evening with ice cream from a stand by the waterfront, and I drove her home. I was planning on just giving her a polite kiss on the cheek, but she surprised me by leaning in and kissing me on the lips. It was a bit unexpected, but I wasn't going to let it put me off. I decided to wait until our next regular Tuesday cycling meetup to suggest another date. Ruth said she'd been worried that I didn't enjoy our time together because I hadn't reached out sooner. I told her I'd had a great time and really enjoyed her company. We scheduled another date for Saturday, a round of golf. I read up on how to keep the conversation going through texting and calling. On Friday, I sent her a message to say I was really looking forward to the game and offered to pick her up. She said she'd prefer to meet me at the golf club, so we agreed on an early afternoon time. We had a great few hours on the course, even though neither of us was very good at golf. That evening, we had a barbecue at my place. We shared a bottle of wine as the night went on. I got ready to drive her home, but Ruth took my car keys, placed them on the counter, and asked to see the bedroom. The next morning, I woke up with Ruth beside me, her arm resting on my chest. She had long dark hair, green eyes, and flawless skin, except for a small scar on her chin that gave her face character. She was tall, about 5 feet 11 inches, and slim. She was probably around 140 lb. She worked as a nurse in the pediatric department, which showed she had a lot of compassion from the moment we met. Her genuine personality and quiet charm had drawn me in. We had breakfast on my patio, and eventually the conversation turned to my situation and the possibility of divorce. I knew it was a sensitive topic, but I also understood why she needed clarity before going ahead. I could see that Rebecca was emotionally invested, and no woman wants to waste time with a man who might reconcile with his wife. I explained Rebecca's reasons for leaving, and from Ruth's reaction, I could tell she didn't think Rebecca was coming back. That conversation nudged me toward the next step in my plan. On Monday, I contacted my lawyer to hire an investigator. I needed to know how many men Rebecca was seeing. Before we could move forward with the divorce, we discovered that Rebecca was seeing several men, mostly married, and spending time with them at Matilda's apartment after their nights out at the club. 2 weeks later, Rebecca was served with the divorce petition that evening. She arrived at the house visibly upset and holding a large brown envelope. I greeted her at the door. I asked my partner tonight why they filed for divorce. I was planning to come home soon, maybe even this week. We can start working on that baby we talked about. I invited her in and motioned for her to sit down at the kitchen table. It's too late for that now. I made it clear when you left that I didn't want you to go, but you made your choice. She tried to justify her actions. I told you I needed to find myself to feel more confident. I cut her off with a hint of sarcasm. So, have you found what you were looking for? Have you had enough of the new relationships and physical encounters? She started to protest, but I didn't let up because it sure seems like it. I've barely heard from you. Since you left, you didn't even call me on my birthday. I guess you were too busy with one of your flings in the Dominican Republic. Even your mother reached out wondering why you didn't call her on Mother's Day. Rebecca's face fell as I continued. So, Rebecca, did you spend all this time chasing after pleasure? Honey, I love you. I realize now I may have gone too far. I'm ready to come back home. Come back home? I didn't move. No, you're not. What do you mean? She asked, her voice rising. I'm still your wife, and this is still my home. I'm going to Matilda's to get my things and then I'll be back. You can't, I explained. Did you even read all the papers in that envelope? Toward the end, there's a judge's ruling. You're not allowed within 550 of this house until the divorce is finalized. Technically, you're violating that order right now. I'm not going to push it, but you need to leave. We'll handle the rest of this legally. Rebecca finally seemed to understand how serious the situation was. The vows we had made to love, respect, and stay faithful had been broken, and there was no fixing that. I told her that if she really wanted the house, she could buy my half for $150. We had nearly paid off the mortgage, so we decided to sell the house and split the proceeds. Either way, she wasn't moving back in. I escorted her to the door, closed it behind her, and locked it. A month later, we finalized the divorce without needing a court appearance. Rebecca got her share of the assets, and we sold the house. I moved on. Meanwhile, Rebecca continued her routine. I heard from a friend that her charter school had asked her to keep her personal life more discreet. Some parents had learned about her relationships with several men and were uncomfortable with her teaching their kids. The mothers in particular had been vocal, suspecting that some of the fathers had been involved with her. Eventually, Rebecca was diagnosed with an STD, which wasn't life-threatening. She was pregnant and her partner wasn't identified, but it was clear that she hadn't been careful with birth control. The child looked a lot like one of the married teachers. At her school, the divorce meant I was no longer working with Rebecca. It's been about a year since all of this began. I've bought a new house, got promoted at work, and most importantly, Ruth and I are now living together. We're excited to share 2 pieces of news. We're getting married this summer, and we're expecting our first child around Christmas.